Have you ever wondered if legends are made or if they're taken? Christopher Wallace, the Notorious B.I.G, was more than a rapper. He was the vessel that carried an empire, hand in hand with Diddy Combs. Together, they built Bad Boy into a kingdom. But when Biggie was gunned down in Los Angeles, whispers grew into rumors that Diddy wasn't just mourning him. He might have had something to do with it. People still argue, they still speculate. But what if I told you it wasn't speculation? What if I told you I was there, in the studio, in the shadows, and in that final night? I confronted Puff myself. I heard what he said. I felt the chill in his voice when he called him the vessel. The night Biggie died wasn't about a feud ending. It was about a ritual being fulfilled. Have you ever lived with a memory so heavy, it changes the way every room feels? Like no matter how bright the lights are, there's always one corner that stays dark. That's what it's been like for me. Because I wasn't just another kid chasing a record deal in the 90s. I wasn't just another hanger-on in Puffy's circle. I was Biggie's ghostwriter. And I saw things that no one else ever saw, things I wish I could forget. But before I tell you about that night in Los Angeles, the night the world lost Biggie Smalls, you need to understand who I was and how I ended up in those shadows. I grew up in Brooklyn, not too far from where Christopher Wallace was raised. Bed-Stuy in the late 80s wasn't a place where dreams felt safe. The soundtrack of my childhood was sirens, gunshots, and the hiss of crack pipes heating in stairwells. My mother worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. My father wasn't there. Writing was the only way I kept from drowning in it all. I filled school notebooks with rhymes and stories, twisting the pain of the streets into something that almost sounded beautiful when I read it back. By the time I was a teenager, I had a reputation in my block for being the kid who could make words cut like knives. That's how I caught the attention of a local DJ. He told me I had something raw, something worth showing off. One connection led to another, and before long, I found myself being introduced to people who worked in Uptown Records. At the time, I thought my life was finally turning around. I thought the words in my notebook were my way out. I didn't realize they'd turn into chains. The first time I saw Biggie, he wasn't the legend the world knows. He was just Christopher Wallace, heavy-set, slouched in a chair, chain glinting under the studio light, half smiling at a joke nobody else heard. And then he opened his mouth. When Biggie rapped, it was like the walls shook. His voice had weight, like it wasn't just sound, but gravity itself pulling you closer. He was magnetic, larger than life, even in those early days. But here's the part people never knew. Biggie was tired. Even before Ready to Die hit, you could see it in his eyes. He carried the pressure of being the hope of a whole block, a whole coast. Every verse was another brick on his shoulders. That's where I came in. Puff needed someone in the background, someone who could sharpen Biggie's words when he was too drained, someone who could keep the machine moving. That someone was me. I wrote lines, polished verses, sometimes entire songs, always hidden, never credited. And at first, I thought it was a blessing. But blessings don't make your skin crawl at night. Curses do. When you're ghostwriting, you don't expect recognition. Your reward is hearing your words come alive. But something strange started happening. I'd write verses for Biggie, only to hear them come out sounding different. Not in his delivery, and that was always unique. No, this was deeper. The tone, the cadence. It wasn't Biggie anymore. It was Puff. Sometimes I'd open Biggie's notebooks and find whole verses in my handwriting, except I had no memory of writing them. Lyrics about death, sacrifice, survival, darker than anything I'd ever penned. I confronted Biggie once. Man, I didn't write this. You know I didn't. He just shrugged, that half smile creeping back. You're just forgetting. You write so much, you can't keep track. But I knew. I remembered. And those words weren't mine. Being around Puff was like standing in the middle of a storm that never ended. His energy filled every room, buzzing, electric, overwhelming. But the longer I stayed near him, the more that energy felt hungry. Puff wasn't satisfied being a producer. He needed to be in the spotlight, in the frame, in the sound itself. He danced in videos, shouted over tracks, pressed his face into every performance. At first, I thought it was ego, but after a while, it felt like something else. Like he wasn't just showing up, he was feeding, taking something from everyone he touched. And every time I left the studio after a late night with him, I felt drained. Not tired, drained. Like a part of me had been left behind in the echo of his laugh. By the time 1996 bled into 1997, the world felt like it was holding its breath. Tupac was gone. 6 bullets in Las Vegas. And just like that, hip-hop's brightest flame snuffed out on the Strip. The West Coast was seething. The East Coast was nervous. And every headline made it feel like the walls were closing in. For us at Bad Boy, the air was heavy. Every phone call, every trip, every appearance, there was a sense that eyes were always on us. Some of those eyes were angry, some were hungry, but none of them were friendly. And in the middle of it all, there was Puff. Always moving, always scheming, always smiling like he was 2 steps ahead of the rest of us. One night after a long studio session, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was cold enough to sting, but it felt cleaner than the suffocating energy inside. That's when John Deal found me. John wasn't the type of man who spooked easy. He was built like a mountain. One of those guys who made you feel safe just by standing near him. But that night, his face was tight, his voice low. He leaned in and said, "If you care about him, tell Big to get away from Puff. Don't let Puff drag him out. I've been hearing some things. Nothing good's waiting." I froze. Gene had been around long enough to know things the rest of us didn't. If he was shaking, I knew it wasn't paranoia. It was survival. I asked him what he meant, what he'd heard. He just shook his head. "You don't want to know. Just tell him. Tell him to get out while he can." The words sat heavy in my chest. I nodded, but my hands were trembling. Later that week, I tried again. I pulled Big aside in the studio. His eyes were heavy, his breathing labored. He'd been moving like a man twice his age. I told him what Gene said. I told him that maybe we should stay out of LA, that maybe Puff had his own reasons for pushing us west when everybody knew the timing was wrong. Big just shook his head. "Man, you worrying too much. Puff knows what he's doing. He's looking out for us. Don't listen to all that noise." But it wasn't noise. It was warning bells. The problem was Biggie was loyal. He trusted Puff more than he trusted his own body, even when he was limping, even when he could barely make it through a night without needing a break. He thought Puff was family. He thought Puff had his back. And maybe that's what scared me the most. It was a week later when everything snapped into focus. We were in Daddy's house studio. The lights were dim, the air smoky, and the beat rattled the walls like bones in a box. Puff was pacing, his eyes locked on Biggie as he rapped. I was flipping through my notebook when I heard it. A whisper at first. I thought I misheard, but then Puff said it again, louder, with this strange reverence in his voice. "The vessel," that's what he called Biggie. Not the star, not the king, not the best, the vessel. He said it like he was naming something sacred, like Biggie wasn't a man, but a container. My stomach dropped. The word lodged itself in my chest like ice. I looked at Puff, and for just a second, I swear his expression shifted. The smile faded, and I saw something else, something hollow and hungry. When Biggie stopped to catch his breath, Puff clapped his hands and grinned like nothing had happened. The room carried on, but I couldn't shake it. That one word echoed in my head until it was all I could hear. That night, the dreams came back. I saw Biggie again, standing in the booth. His body looked the same, but his eyes were empty. Not tired, not sad, but gone. His mouth moved, but no words came out. And behind him, there was Puff, just standing there, in the shadows, watching. And then he stepped forward, slow, deliberate, his smile sharp, and like smoke, he slid into Biggie's body. Not a touch, not a fight, just a possession. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. My chest hurt like someone had pressed down on it all night. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't even recognize myself. My face was pale, my eyes sunken. I hadn't just dreamed it, I'd felt it. From that night on, everything changed. When Puff walked into a room, I couldn't breathe. The music sounded darker, heavier. Even the way Biggie rapped felt different, like the words were being pulled out of him instead of coming from him. Sometimes, when Puff leaned over Big's shoulder, I swore I saw Biggie's outline flicker. Just for a moment. Like he was less solid, less there. I stopped writing in my notebooks late at night. I was afraid of what would show up on the page. Afraid that whatever was working through me was feeding him. Every time Puff smiled, it felt like he was smiling at me. Like he knew I saw it. Like he wanted me to. People on the outside thought it was just music, just business. East Coast versus West Coast. But I was inside it. I could feel it. This wasn't about records or pride. This was about something darker. Something that reached past the charts and into the marrow of our bones. The feud was a stage. The award shows, the parties, the interviews, all of it was window dressing. The real story was happening behind closed doors, in studios at 3 a.m., in words whispered like prayers. And at the center of it all was Puff, calm, smiling, watching. Every time he called Biggie the vessel, I felt a chill crawl up my spine, because by then I understood Biggie wasn't just making music, he was being prepared for something none of us could stop. Looking back now, I can see it clear as day. The signs were everywhere. Gene's warning, the strange verses that weren't mine, the dreams that felt more like memories of things that hadn't happened yet. But at the time, I told myself it was stress, paranoia. That's what you do when the truth is too big to face. You pretend it isn't there, but the truth didn't care. The night of the Soul Train Awards still feels like a fever dream. Bright lights, restless shadows, and a current in the air that told me something was about to snap. By then, the East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't just music gossip, it was blood. Tupac had been gunned down just months before, and his ghost still hung heavy over Los Angeles. Everyone in Bad Boy felt the tension. Eyes followed us everywhere. Conversations cut short when we entered a room. It wasn't a city welcoming us. It was a city daring us. And in the center of all that noise stood Puff, grinning, flawless suit, acting like the boos and whispers meant nothing. But I had already heard too much. Gene's warning still pressed against my chest. If you care about him, tell Big to get away from Puff. Don't let Puff drag him out. Nothing good's waiting. That night, I realized Gene wasn't just warning me. He was predicting what was about to happen. The theater was electric, the kind of night where the cameras caught every bead of sweat. When Biggie walked out to announce Toni Braxton's win, the boos rained down. You could feel the hostility bleeding from the crowd. Big smiled, that big teddy bear grin, but I saw it flicker. For just a second, his eyes dimmed. He wasn't a superstar in that moment. He was a man standing under a spotlight, weighed down by something invisible. Backstage, the noise was louder than ever. Laughter, chatter, people pretending nothing was wrong. But I couldn't shake the vibration in the air, like the floor itself was humming. That's when Puff put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Walk with me." He led me down a hallway into a side room, small, dim, away from the chaos. The walls buzzed faintly with the sound of the crowd, but inside, it was muffled, too quiet. On the table sat 2 glasses, amber liquid catching the light like fire. Puff slid one toward me and lifted his own. "Relax," he said, smooth as silk. "Let's talk like family." My throat was bone dry. My instincts told me to refuse. But something in his stare, told me that wasn't an option. I lifted the glass. The first sip burned going down, but the burn wasn't the worst part. It was the numbness, a slow creep across my tongue, down my throat, settling into my chest. I set the glass down, my hand trembling. My heart was pounding so loud I thought he could hear it. "I know what you're doing," I said. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "The songs, the changes, the way you talk about him like he's not even a person. When we get back to New York, I'm telling Big everything." Puff chuckled, low, deliberate, the kind of laugh that says he's already 2 steps ahead. "You figured it out, but it doesn't matter. It's already in motion." I frowned. My head felt heavy. "What's in motion?" He leaned in closer, his cologne sharp, his eyes calm but blazing. "Energy don't die, it just moves. Somebody's got to go so somebody else can rise." My stomach turned. The room tilted. "What ritual, Puff? What are you talking about?" His smile was small, sharp, knowing. "I always win. I need everything. Nobody shines brighter than me. Nobody ever will. You think these artists are stars? Nah, they're fuel. They're vessels. I take a piece of them. Every video, every verse, until there's nothing left. Then I rise higher." The words sank into me like ice water. I could feel my body starting to betray me, the drink spreading its weight through my limbs. I forced out, "What do you mean by that?" Puff tilted his head, almost amused. "Everything is already in place." He clapped my shoulder, firm but almost fatherly. "You take care, King." Then he turned, walked out, and slipped back into his entourage, laughing, radiant, like he'd already been crowned. The room swayed, my knees buckled. My breath came shallow and fast. The drink wasn't just liquor. My body was shutting down, heavy, slow. I stumbled, knocking over the glass, amber liquid spilling across the floor like blood. I tried to call out, but my tongue was thick, my throat dry. The last thing I heard before darkness swallowed me was the muffled roar of the crowd outside, cheering, laughing, alive, while I sank into nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hotel room I didn't recognize. The curtains drawn tight, the air heavy and stale. My head throbbed, my stomach lurched. I stumbled to my feet, unsteady, moving like I was underwater. The TV remote sat on the nightstand. My hand shook as I pressed the button. The screen lit up, spilling cold light across the room. The morning after Biggie's death felt unreal. Not like waking up from a nightmare, but like still being trapped inside one. Los Angeles was buzzing. Radios played Biggie's songs on repeat. Candlelight vigils formed outside clubs and hotels. Newspapers called it another chapter in the East Coast-West Coast feud. Reporters leaned on words like inevitable and retaliation. But I knew better. It wasn't fate. It wasn't a feud. It was a ritual. And it was finished. I remember watching Puff on TV a few days later. The cameras caught him walking into a studio, shades on, expression calm but glowing. That's the only word for it, glowing. Most men would have been broken, crushed under the weight of losing their best friend and their biggest star. But Puff looked sharper than ever. His voice was steady, his suit immaculate, his smile fixed. Then came the music. "I'll be missing you." Mo money, mo problems. Everywhere you turned, Puff's voice was there. On the radio, on TV, in the streets. His face in every video. His ad-libs stitched into every verse. He wasn't fading into grief. He was rising, and the world cheered. They saw a man honoring his fallen brother. But I saw something else. I saw a man feeding. Every performance, every tear on stage, every chant of B.I.G. by the crowd, Puff was drinking it in. His aura grew stronger, brighter, heavier. It wasn't just music anymore, it was sustenance. And I couldn't unhear the words he whispered to me that night. They're vessels. I take a piece of them until there's nothing left. Then I rise higher. It's easy to dismiss what I'm saying as paranoia. But look back, look close. Every artist near Puff seemed to burn fast and fade faster. Some were left drained, their careers shriveled. Others never made it out at all. I thought about those long nights in Daddy's house studio, how Puff inserted himself into every track, every video, every shot. At first, it looked like ego, but no. Ego doesn't explain the way he lingered. Ego doesn't explain why he called Biggie the vessel. That was never vanity. That was hunger. It clicked then. All those times he stepped into the spotlight, he wasn't just showcasing, he was siphoning, taking, bit by bit. And when Biggie was gone, Puff didn't stumble. He soared, because the vessel was emptied, and the ritual was complete. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. I'd sit in silence, the TV off, the phone unplugged, staring at my notebooks like they were cursed objects, because they were. I was the ghostwriter, the one feeding words into the machine, verses that felt darker than my own, lines I never remembered writing. Had I been a part of it? Was I the hand that penned the incantations for the ritual? I replayed every moment I ignored the signs. Gene's warning, the dreams of Puff stepping inside Biggie like a second skin, that drink in the side room. I told myself I could protect him, that I could stop what was coming, but I failed. And a voice inside me whispered the question I didn't want to answer. Did Puff let me live because I wasn't a threat, or because I was next? After Biggie's funeral, the haunting began. It wasn't just grief, it was presence. I'd hear Puff's laugh in empty rooms, soft but unmistakable. I'd wake to whispers I couldn't decipher, fading the second I opened my eyes. One night, I turned on the TV, and Puff's face filled the screen. Another tribute performance. The moment his voice hit, my chest tightened. My body felt weaker, like something invisible was draining me through the speakers. And then there were the mirrors. I'd look up and see my reflection, pale, sunken, eyes hollow. But behind me, just for a heartbeat, I'd see Biggie's shadow. Not whole, just an outline, flickering, watching. And over his shoulder, always, that same smile I saw in LA. That's when I realized the ritual hadn't ended with Biggie's death. It was still going. Every time the songs played, every time people cried and cheered and raised their lighters in the air, the energy kept flowing. Puff didn't just take from Biggie, he was still taking. From everyone who remembered him, everyone who mourned him, everyone who hit repeat on those records. And he would keep taking. It's been years now, but the chill hasn't left me. The truth sits in my chest like a stone. I was there. I saw it. I heard him call Biggie the vessel. I watched him glow brighter after the bullets fell. And I can't shake the question, was Biggie the first or just the biggest? How many others were vessels before him, drained and discarded so someone else could rise? The world sees a mogul, a genius, a survivor. But I see something else. I see a man who treats artists like candles, burning them down to keep himself lit. I see a ritual that never stopped, a hunger that will never end. And I see a future, a dark one. Because if legends are vessels, then someone else will have to be next. Biggie didn't just die that night in Los Angeles. He was consumed. Biggie didn't just die that night in Los Angeles. He was consumed. And the world, it celebrated the man who took his light and wore it as his own. Now I can't help but wonder, if legends are vessels, and one by one they're emptied for someone else's rise, who's next? If you're still listening, tell me in the comments. Do you believe Biggie's death was just the end of a feud? Or was it something darker? Because once you start looking at the pattern, once you start asking the questions, you'll see it too. And you may never hear Diddy's music the same way again.